Hi, and welcome to this commentary on Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible. This section we'll be looking at Act 1. I'm assuming that you've had perhaps a working knowledge of what happens in this play, so I would recommend that if you don't, that you watch a full production, the film, or one of the videos of a stage production, or an actual stage production if you can. Before we begin, I'm just going to highlight the main things and things to watch out for in Act 1 of Arthur Miller's wonderful play, The Crucible. Crucible, of course, either a container in which metals are heated to purify the valuable metals from the less valuable. Figuratively, that's what happens in this play. We sort out the noble characters from those who are not so noble. The other meaning of a crucible is a severe test or trial. And of course, this play based on the real events of the Salem witch hunt, but fictionalized. And unlike the film, the play begins in the bedroom upstairs in Reverend Parris's house. Act 1 is called an overture. Of course, that word normally referred to the beginning of a musical production. Here it's an overture. As in any play, the other word, I suppose, is an exposition. We're learning who the characters are. And so this play starts with this quiet moment, Reverend Parris praying. Of course, by the end of Act 1, there's going to be the complete opposite. There's going to be a very different atmosphere on stage. And it's interesting to think of how cleverly it's been dramatically built up. So he's praying. The Negro slave Tituba enters. The stage direction tells us Paris brought her with him from Barbados, where he was a merchant, a businessman, a salesman, before becoming a priest. And this here, she clearly loves Betty, but she's very frightened because any trouble is going to lead to her eventually because she's a slave. She's asking, how's Betty? Parris telling her to get out of the way, desperately pleading with his child to wake up. So this child is comatose. That's where Abigail Williams, 17 years old, enters. Strikingly beautiful, I guess, is worth remembering. And an orphan, it tells us. And also this endless capacity for dissembling, for deception, for what is not true, deceiving. She tells him the doctor's here, or Susanna's here, the messenger girl, the servant of the doctor, and the doctor has told Susanna to come and tell her, to Reverend Parris, that the doctor cannot discover any medicine for it in his books. And he's been searching, and he says you might look to unnatural things for the cause of it. Witchcraft. And of course, Parris does not want it to be witchcraft because he's paranoid he might lose his position. Shifting. And so he is desperate to tell them that he has sent for Reverend Hale of Beverly, the town where Reverend Hale comes from. And he wants Reverend Hale to come and confirm that there are no unnatural causes. Not in his house, not in the house of the priest. Abigail warns Susanna to speak nothing of it in the village, speak nothing of unnatural causes. Parris says, Susanna says, I, sir, pray for her. The rumor of witchcraft, Abigail says. You'd better go and speak to them. And here it's revealed what we find in the movie. We find out right at the beginning, but in the play, we've got to wait for this. He has discovered her, his niece, Abigail, and his daughter, the comatose Betty, dancing like heathen, like unchristian people in the forest. And that's maybe a good time to remind you the community here is the Puritans. The Puritans fled England because they didn't like the teachings of the church and they wanted to form a new community where they could interpret the Bible literally, purely, and that's how they became known as the Puritans. where dancing is not allowed in the Puritan culture. Regulations, religious regulations. That's already an offense. We did dance. And she says she'll be whipped for that, but she's denying witchcraft. He can almost tell that she's not told the truth. You've not opened with me. She lies again and confesses, yeah, we danced, and when he jumped out of the bush, she was frightened. Never heard Betty. Here's an example of his paranoia. They will ruin me with it. That's what his worry is, that this is going to affect his job. And this is more details on her comatose position. She can't move herself since midnight. Again, his paranoia, my enemies will bring it out. If she won't tell him, then his enemies will bring out this information. Let me know what you've done. Do you understand? I have many enemies. There's a faction, a group that is sworn to drive me from my pulpit. He believes they're out to get him. You understand that? Yes, I think so, sir. And he says there's some obscene practice happened in his own household. Abominations are done in the forest. She says it was sport. It was just joking around. He points at the Betty lying unconscious and says, you call this sport? If you know anything, tell me. And what else did he see? I saw Tituba, the slave, waving her arms over the fire. What was she doing? Why was she doing that? And a screeching and gibberish. She was talking spells, making incantations. She was swaying like a dumb beast over the fire. Abigail lies and says it's just Barbados songs. But I saw something else too. A dress on the grass. And he saw, or thought that he saw, someone naked running through the trees. She denies. Nothing more. I swear it, Uncle. He says he's been trying to get these stiff-necked people to think his way of thinking. Good respect was rising, and now his very character has been compromised. I've given you a home, child. I've put clothes upon your back. Your name in the town, it's entirely white, is it not? It's unblemished, isn't it? And of course, she's going to say, yes, it is, but we discover very soon it's not. She says there's no blush about her name, so he hasn't found out about her affair that she had with a married man, the husband of Goody Proctor, Goody meaning Mrs. He says, is there any other reason why you were fired? I've heard that she doesn't want to come to church because she doesn't want to sit so close to something soiled, something made dirty. A girl, an unmarried girl who's already had sex with a grown man. Abigail said she hates me. I didn't want to be a slave. She used to work for Goody Proctor. But she accuses her of being a bitter, cold, sniveling woman. And I refused to work for that woman. We discover she was fired, actually. But Parris obviously doesn't know the whole story because he says, still, you've been 7 months out of that house and you've not worked for anyone else. She says she doesn't want to black her face or be a slave for any of them. Does he begrudge giving her a bed in the house? No, no. My name is good in the village, and it's not good in the village. There'll be no blush of I will not have it said my name is soiled. Goody Proctor's a gossiping liar. That's where Mrs. Putnam enters. So we haven't met Mrs. Proctor yet, or John Proctor, the man with whom Abigail had an affair. We'll meet them soon. Or John at any rate. We will only meet Elizabeth Goody Proctor in Act 2. But this is the entry of Mrs. Putnam. So her husband's very wealthy in the town. She is a twisted soul of 45, and she's twisted because she's lost many children in childbirth. That's why she's a death-ridden woman. She's obsessed with how many children she lost who were still born in childbirth. Parris doesn't want to see anyone, but when he sees who it is, a certain deference springs into him, a certain respect, because they're the wealthiest family in town. Although his worry remains, Goody Putnam come in, and she's happy. It's a marvel. It's surely a stroke of hell upon you. And we'll discover why soon. She thinks that Betty flew, so she's convinced this is something supernatural. And she says someone saw her flying over the barn. And here's Mr. Putnam, the wealthy landowner. There's wealthy, well-to-do, in near 50, almost 50. Putnam, it's a providence that things out now. It's a providence. He thinks it's great that news is broken. There's witches around. What's out? What's? Mr. Putnam says her eyes is closed. Look, you, Anne. Why, that's strange. Ours is open. This is Parris talking here. Parris says, your Ruth is sick. She says, it's not sick. It's the devil's touch. So her daughter's got the same symptoms as Betty. She's forked and hoofed. It's the devil in them. She seems happy with this. We'll discover why soon. What's wrong with What's wrong with Ruth? How did she ail? She never waked this morning. Her eyes are open. She walks. She doesn't hear anything. She doesn't see anything. Can't eat anything. Her soul is taken. Putnam has had the news that they've sent for Reverend Hale of Beverly. Parris is only a precaution. He's got such experience. Yes, he found a witch. He'll find another one here. Maybe. And he thought that were a witch. He is certain there's no element of witchcraft. I am certain there'll be no element of witchcraft here. Again, they will howl me out of Salem for such corruption in my house, worried about his own position. Putnam says you can't deny it. There are hurtful, vengeful spirits around. And she here tells her backstory. It was 7 babies that she put in their graves, unbaptized. They were so young. They died in birth. They were born so healthy, but the very night they were born, they withered. And Ruth is turning strange. Like a sucking mouth were pulling on her, so she sent her own daughter to Tituba. Why? Tituba knows how to speak to the dead. And of course that goes against biblical teaching. So Parris says it's a formidable sin to conjure up the dead. She says she's going to take that sin on her soul, but otherwise how is she going to find out who murdered her babies? She thinks it wasn't just bad luck, that they were murdered. And that's why it's such good news, because that's why Ruth is struck dumb now. Because the powers of darkness are stopping her mouth. So it's some proof, yes, that someone is responsible for this. It's a marvelous sign. And if they can find this murdering witch, then they can live normal lives again. Parris, Abigail, then you were conjuring spirits last night. This did have to do with spirits. Because now he's heard Ruth was sent there to conjure spirits. Abigail still denies it and says, no, it was only Tituba and Ruth. We discover later she had her motives in this thing as well. He says, what bad payment for my charity. I've looked after you. This is what you've done in return. Now I'm undone. Now I'm messed up. He says, you're not undone. Go downstairs and say you found it yourself. He says, in my house, they'll joke. And this is where another character enters, another servant, Mercy Lewis, who has this ironic name because she's merciless. And we find out why. She's the servant at their house. And how did she treat these girls? She slaps them around, you'll see. She only wants to see how Betty was doing. Why aren't you home? Who's with Ruth? She gave a sneeze before her grandma's with her. It's a sign of life. She says, Mercy says, I think that sneeze will shake her wits. Looks at this patient. Abigail advises her uncle to go and speak to the crowd. Even Putnam says, you strike out against the devil and the village will bless you for it. Go and pray with them. He says, I'll lead them in a psalm, but that's all. Mrs. Putnam tells Mercy to go home. Mrs. Putnam leaves. Parris says to Abigail, if she starts for the window, cry for me at once. Terrible power in her arms today. And the adults have left the room. Abigail's asking about Ruth. She's walking like a dead one, Mercy says. And Abigail shakes Betty in the stage direction there. Betty doesn't stir. And Mercy says, have you tried beating her? I gave Ruth a good one and it waked her for a minute. Yeah, let me have her. So she wants to give her a clap here. Mercy, the merciless Mercy. And Abigail stops her, but only because he'll be coming up, not because it might be the wrong thing to do. And she's already the leader here. If they be questioning us, tell them we danced. I told them as much already. Aye, and what more? He knows Tituba conjured Ruth's sisters to come out of the grave. And what more? He saw you naked. So it was Mercy who is running around naked. Oh, Jesus. And another character entering, an important one, Mary Warren. She's now the servant to John Proctor and Elizabeth Proctor. After Abigail was fired, after having the affair with John, also 17, she's subservient. She does what she's told. She's quiet. She's naive. She'll believe what you tell her. A lonely girl. What do we do? She's in a panic. The village is out. Everyone's talking witchcraft. They'll be calling us witches. Mercy can see straight away this one could be the weak link in the chain. She means to tell. I know it. We got to tell witchery's a hanging crime. We must tell you. You'll only be whipped for dancing and other things. You'll. The pronouns here say something. You'll only be whipped. Including herself. Only Abigail will be whipped. Abigail says, no, 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 no. We'll be whipped. And I do apologize for all these funny symbols that came up in the punctuation. I've never done any of it, Abby. I only looked. Oh, you're a great looker, aren't you? Betty whimpers. I'll beat you. Threatens her. I'll beat you. I talked to your papa. I told him everything. So, I want my mama. Abigail with alarm. Your mama's dead and buried. I think it's the only reference we have in this play to Parris's wife. Whatever happened to her. I'll fly to Mama, let me fly. She raises her arm, streaks for the window, gets one leg out. Abigail pulling her away from the window. I told him everything, he knows now. And here's the truth. Betty says, you drank blood, Abby, you didn't tell him that. So was she actually listening? Was she just pretending to be comatose? Betty, you'll never say that again. But the truth comes out from Betty. You did. You drank the charm to kill John Proctor's wife. You drank the charm to kill Goody Proctor. So, the affair is not over. She still likes John and she wants John for herself, and that's why she was involved. She wanted to do a voodoo charm to kill Elizabeth Proctor. Shut it, she hits her. Betty cries. And sorry, got to move over for the printing here. Abigail, bossy again. Accordingly, we danced. Tituba conjured Ruth Putnam's dead sisters, because that's already been confessed by Mrs. Putnam. And that's all. And she threatens, you tell anything else, I'll come to you in the middle of the night and I'll get you. And she tells what happened to her parents. She says Indians smashed their skulls in the middle of the night. Goes and shakes Betty again. Betty collapses. Mary, she's going to die. She's going to die. I say, shut it, Mary Warren. And that's when John Proctor enters. And he has a natural authority and magnetism. Mary Warren sees him and leaps in fright, going home. He's angry because she's supposed to be at home doing the housework. He says, I forbid you leave the house. Didn't I not? Why should I pay you? I look for you more often than I look for my cows. She says, I came to see the great doings in the world. I'll show you a great doing on your ass. Now go home. Mercy Lewis is afraid of him and strangely titillated, strangely excited by him. She goes home. She's got to watch Ruth. Good morning, Mr. Proctor. Mercy sidles out, but it's Abigail we should be watching. Since he's come in this damned apostrophe, Abigail has stood as though on tiptoe, absorbing his presence wide-eyed. She still likes him. And you can see that even in her first words, and I love this interjection here. Gah! I'd almost forgot how strong you are, John Proctor. That's what she likes about him, one of the things. And he's smiling at first. That smile's going to change. What's this mischief here? A nervous laugh. She's only gone silly somehow. He says they're all talking witchcraft. Posh nonsense. Winningly, she wants to win him over with a confidential wicked air. We were dancing in the woods. She got a fright. You wicked yet, aren't you? A trill of expectant laughter escapes her. She thinks he's going to kiss her or something. She dares come closer, feverishly looking into his eyes. And we got this contrast between warmth and cold in this play. And I mean, she's associated with excessive warmth. You'll be clapped in the stocks before you're 20. The stocks, those things where your head gets stuck through the one hole and your arms and your legs, your feet. Give me a word, John, a soft word. Have a tender word with me. Oops. Her concentrated desire destroys his smile. I thought it was later on when she mentions his wife. But that's when he gets angry. This is where his smile goes. You can see she still wants him. Her concentrated desire. No, that's done with, he says. She says, you came all this way to watch a girl fly. I know you better. She says, I came to see your uncle. Put it out of mind. She says, John, I'm waiting for you every night. So she's still waiting. I never gave you hope to wait for me. She says, I've got something better than hope. I'll not be coming for you more. You're joking with me. You know me better. And these are these sexy lines here. I know how you clutched my back behind your house and sweated like a stallion whenever I come near. Or did I dream that? It's she put me out. You cannot pretend it were you. I saw your face when she put me out, and you loved me then, and you do now. He says that's a wild thing to say. A wild thing may say wild things. That's how she sees herself. But not so wild. I've seen you nights. I've hardly stepped off my farm. I've a sense for heat, John. There's hot and cold again. And yours, your heat, has drawn me to my window, and I've seen you looking up, burning in your loneliness. And burning again, also suggesting heat. Do you tell me you've never looked up at my window? I may have looked up. He admits it. Even after she was thrown out, he has looked up. He says, and you must. You are no wintry man. You're not a cold man. I know you, John. I know you. And of course, these words "no," this word "no" also means I've had sex with you. I cannot sleep for dreaming. I cannot dream, but I wake and walk about the house as though I'd find you coming through some little child. How do you call me child? She's had sex with him. That's why she doesn't want him to call her child. He says, yes, I may think of you softly from time to time. As he tells us, from sometimes I'll still think of you, but I won't touch you. We never touched. But we did. But we did not. And here he's going to get angry because this is where she mentions the wife. How can a strong man let such a sickly wife? You'll speak nothing of her. That's where he gets angry. Blackening my name in the village. Well, I guess she's telling the truth. She's telling lies about me. She's a cold, sniveling woman. Do you look for whipping? That's where we hear a psalm, a prayer, being the prayer that Parris went downstairs to lead. And it's a lovely dramatic moment here because while we're hearing that prayer, Abigail has this beautiful speech about what John Proctor gave her when They were having this affair. I look for John Proctor that took me from my sleep and put knowledge in my heart. I never knew what pretend Salem was. I never knew the lying lessons I was taught by all these Christian women and their covenanted men. You love me. John, pity me, pity me. And that's where, in the psalm that's being sung, we hear the words going up to Jesus. And that's when Betty claps her ears suddenly and whines. Betty runs over. Betty's sitting up and screaming. And the scream is so loud they can hear it downstairs in the church. Proctor calls Betty. Proctor, what you doing, girl? What else? You stop that wailing. The singing stopped. Parris rushes in. What happened? What are you doing to her? Betty, Betty. Mrs. Putnam enters. Mr. Putnam. Mercy Lewis. I thought she went home. She was supposed to go home. Parris is lightly slapping Betty's face while she moans and tries to get up. Abigail, she's heard you singing, and suddenly she's up and screaming. Mrs. Putnam, the psalm, she cannot bear to hear the Lord's name. And maybe that's true, and maybe Betty decided to pretend that it was the Lord's name that woke her up. Maybe that scene between the two of them was too much for Betty. I don't blame her. Get the doctor. Mark it for a sign, mark it. And that's when such a lovely character enters, Rebecca Nurse, the old lady of 72, white-haired with her walking stick. Putnam, yeah, it's witchcraft. Mrs. Putnam, when they cannot bear to hear the name of the Lord. Rebecca, go to her lost. She suddenly cannot bear to hear the Lord's name. So Parris defers to her. Can she help her? And this old man, Giles Corey, enters. He's 83, but still powerful. She knows that he's someone who loves talking, so she says, there's heart sickness here, Giles Corey. Please keep the quiet. And he takes a line and a half to say, you haven't said a word yet. Be quiet now. And what does Rebecca do? There's quiet. Gentleness exudes from her. Betty is gradually whimpering, quietly whimpering, eyes shut. Rebecca simply stands over the child, who gradually quiets. Rebecca quietens her with gentleness, with a gentle presence. Mrs. Putnam, astonished, what have you done? And later on, I think Mrs. Putnam's going to use this to accuse poor Rebecca of doing some charm. Rebecca goes and sits down. Putnam says, why don't you go and see if you can wake our Ruth, Rebecca? And here Rebecca reveals her practical experience of children. But of course, in telling this now, it's going to really upset Mrs. Putnam, because Mrs. Putnam only managed to get one child, and Rebecca's bragging, I have 11 children, and I've got 26 grandchildren, and I've seen them having their silly seasons. She's saying, yeah, this is childish nonsense. And when it comes on them, they'll run the devil bow-legged, keeping up with their mischief. The devil will run to keep up with their mischief. She'll wake when she tires of it. I guess she knows this is children's nonsense. A child's spirit is like a child. You can never catch it by running after it. You must stand still. And for love, it will soon itself come back. Her practical knowledge of what children are like. That's the truth of it, Rebecca. Mrs. Putnam says this is not just a silly thing. She won't eat. Or maybe she's not hungry. And she says, she's heard rumors that they're going to look for loose spirits. She's heard promise of that. Parris says, yeah, also that people are talking about the devil, but I want to convince them that they're wrong. Proctor says, well, why don't you come out and call them wrong? Did you consult anyone before you called Reverend Hale of Beverly to look for devils? He's not coming to look for devils. Why? Because he's coming actually to say there's no devils. And what's he coming for? There's children dying in the village. I didn't see anyone dying. He says to Parris, did you call a meeting about this? I'm sick of meetings. Rebecca suggests, I think you'd best send Reverend Hale back. This will set us all to arguing again, and this implies that they've recently argued about something. And we find out there's court cases. We thought to have peace this year. She says rely on the doctor and good prayer. Mrs. Putnam says, yeah, the doctor's baffled. The doctor doesn't know what to do. She says, then go to God. I'm scared of spirits. Let's blame ourselves. Putnam says, but yeah, how can I blame myself? I've only got one child. And here, Putnam, you think it's God's work. You should never lose a child. And I buried all but one. Putnam says to Parris, you're going to look for the witchcraft. Proctor says, you can't command him, We can't command Mr. Parris, he says to Putnam. We vote by name, not acreage. In other words, the fact that you've got so much land doesn't make you the boss. Putnam, yeah, I didn't know you're so worried about us. I don't see you in the church. He says, well, I don't want to come to church to hear him preaching hellfire and bloody damnation. He talks of hell all the time in church. He hardly ever mentioned God anymore. Even Rebecca says, yeah, even some people are scared to bring their children to church. He says, yeah, but I don't preach for the children. It's not the children who are not fulfilling their obligations to this ministry. And again, he's mentioning his selfish things he's bothered about, such as wood. He's been waiting since November for wood. They say he's given £6 to buy wood. He says, no, that's part of my salary. I'm supposed to get 6 extra for firewood. Even Giles says, I didn't know, you're very good in your maths. You're very good with money for a priest. And he even mentions his businessman past. He left a thrifty business in the Barbados to serve the Lord. So he's going to look after himself financially, in other words. Even that might be the devil. Proctor says more about him. You're the first minister here who ever wanted the title deeds to the house. Don't I deserve a house? Yes, to live in, but it's not to say you've got to own it. The last meeting I was at, you were talking about property issues, deeds and mortgages. He says, yeah, it's because I don't want to just be thrown out whenever you want. I want a bit of a guarantee here. And talking about hell again. And this, your followers. I mean, Parris said that he believed there was a faction out to get him. So it seems he thinks that Proctor is the leader of that faction. There's a party in this church. I'm not blind. There's a faction. People who are out to get rid of him. Against you? Why, then I must find it and join it. Rebecca, it does not mean that. I do mean it. No, you're not like that, John. Shake hands with your minister. Be decent. Proctor's got work to do. Even Giles Corey says, why have we been suing each other? Could that be the devil? He even took £4 damages from Proctor for saying that Corey burnt the roof of his house. But I'm going to skip all this about the forest and the lumber. Proctor says Putnam's grandfather had a habit of leaving in his will people land that never belonged to him. And Giles says, yeah, he nearly willed away my north pasture, but I beat him up before I could do that. Some arguments there about land, but that's where Reverend John Hale enters. One of the central characters. He appears loaded down with half a dozen heavy books. The books, of course, are symbolic of his knowledge of esoteric subjects. The books are heavy. They are weighted with authority. These are Hale's, I was going to say his first words, but they're his first words. But the first thing we see of him are these books, weighted with authority, his knowledge, and calls the devil the old boy, will need hard study. And he recognizes Rebecca Nurse straight away just because he says she looks as such a good soul should. He's heard of her. And we've all heard of your great charities, what a good woman she is. And then, of course, he's introduced to Mr. Hale, who he even calls distinguished company because he's so wealthy. Your child also sick. Her soul seems blown away. She cannot eat. These guys also have afflicted children. No, these are farmers. Giles Corey says of John, he don't believe in witches. I never spoke about witches one way or the other. Giles says I've got some questions. Proctor, wanting to go and do his work, saying to Hale, I've heard you sensible. I hope you'll leave some of your sensible qualities here in Salem. And Proctor goes off stage. Parris says, look at her. She was standing at the window like she was trying to fly. Putnam mentioning, her waking up in the psalm with the Lord's name. It's ironically, we cannot look to superstition in this, of course, and it's a very superstitious field. The devil is precisely he says here, you're going to have to believe me if I say there's no sign of demonic possession. Yes, we'll agree with you. So it goes now to start investigating, asks Parris, your first warning, I found them dancing in the forest. You permit dancing? No, of course not. We're the Puritans. And then we start caring about Tituba. She has knowledge of magic, of the occult, of spells, of calling up spirits. That's what they mean by conjuring here. And she confesses that she sent her child Ruth to learn from Tituba, who murdered her sisters. And of course, Rebecca is still in the room. That's really going to shock Rebecca. Horrified. Goody Anne, you sent a child to conjure up the dead. Let God blame me, not you, Rebecca. I'll not have you judging me anymore, and that's a big theme in this play, the idea of judging. I'll not have you judging, minus that little block. Is it natural to lose all these children? Rebecca turns her face away out of compassion, empathy for Mrs. Putnam. That what pain this must have. This is pain on behalf of Mrs. Putnam for losing all her children. Reading in the books, what's there in these books, you'll find all the devil, the incubi and succubi witches. We'll find him, and I mean to crush him utterly if he has shown his face. And Rebecca's only concern is, will it hurt the child, sir? And Hale saying it might. We may have to rip and tear to get her free. And Rebecca, well, I think I'll go then. I'm too old for this. Doesn't want to watch this process. Why, Rebecca, we may open up the boil of all our troubles. Let's hope for that. I pray. I go to God for you, sir. Parris, I hope you don't mean we go to Satan. I wish I knew. So she's not sure if they're going to God or going to Satan. This is where Giles asks his question about his wife reading books, and she hides them. He wakes in the middle of the night, finds her reading, and then he can't say his prayers, and he doesn't realize it. But asking this now, when she leaves the room, he can pray again. Asking this now, he doesn't realize, but later on they're going to use this to jail her. He just wants to know more about the books. I will discuss it. So Hale starts speaking to Betty. Parris again, why would he choose my house? And Hale answers that because the devil wants the best. What's it a victory if the devil gets the daughter of the alcoholic? He wants the priest's daughter. So starting to ask questions. Does she see someone? He starts intoning or chanting in Latin. Starts asking Abigail what sort of dancing, and we find out a bit more about the night before. Parris says he saw a kettle, meaning a pot, we can say. She says it's soup. What sort of soup? Beans and lentils. Was there something living in it? And Parris says he saw something. That jumped in. What jumped in? And she says it was a frog. So that sounds like a nasty spell they're making. A frog. That you call the devil. And she, of course, now when she's asked directly, has to now blame someone. I never called him Tituba. Tituba, the servant. She called the devil. I want to speak to her. Bring her up. I know not. She spoke Barbados. Poor Tituba's going to get in trouble now. Was there strangeness, an earthquake? Kind of wake up Betty. Did your cousin drink any of the brew? She never drank it. Did you drink it? No, sir. Did Tituba ask you to drink it? She tried, but I refused. Why are you concealing? I'm a good girl. And that's where Tituba enters. Abigail instantly points at her, blaming someone else. She made me do it. She made Betty do it. Trying to get out of trouble herself. I'll be shocked to hear her saying that Tituba made her do it. Abigail begged Tituba. Abigail, she makes me drink blood. My baby's blood. No chicken blood. I give she chicken blood. I don't truck with no devil. Are you silencing this child? I love me, Betty. You've sent your spirit out. Abigail making up stories now. She sends her spirit on me in church. She makes me laugh at prayer. She often laughed at prayer. She comes to me every night to go and drink blood, spouting lies about Tituba, to blame Tituba. You beg me conjure. She beg me make charm. Abigail wanted Tituba to make this charm to kill Goody Proctor. Abigail still making lies. Sometimes I wake up and I'm standing naked, and she's singing her Barbados songs and tempting me with. Hale says, Tituba, I want you to wake this child. I have no power. You'll free her. I don't compact with no devil. You'll confess yourself, or I'll take you out and whip you. So, she's got to make up a confession soon enough. Otherwise, she's going to be, now they're talking hanged. She must be taken and hanged. No, don't hang. And now she's got to play their story. I tell him I don't desire to work for him, sir. And that shuts them up, because it sounds like she's talking about the devil. Yes, the devil. Then you saw him. We're going to help you tear yourself free. And she, I guess, wants to pass the buck. Someone else bewitching these children. The devil got him numerous witches. And that's what they want. They want names. So Hale starts, you would be a good Christian woman. And you love these children. Oh, yes, sir, I don't desire to. And you love God. I love God. Bless him, bless him. Bless the Lord. And that's when they start with the names. There's someone else with the devil. Who came with him? And it's Putnam here, mentioning names. And I never know which one's which. Apparently one of these was the village beggar woman. One was the prostitute. That's the first names that come to Putnam's mind, and he puts those names in Tituba's head. So she's still, I guess, deciding who she's going to say. And now she says it's woman. It was dark. They were always running around Salem. I believe so, sir. He says, well, don't worry. The devil can't overcome a minister. You've confessed yourself to witchcraft, and that speaks a wish to come into heaven's side. We will bless you, Tituba. And you can speak freely. 2, 3, how many people? She says there was 4. Their names. And here's this whole story. The devil wanted her to kill Parris. And I guess she's thinking up a story. And what the devil said. And then he came one night and said, look, I have white people belong to me. And I look, and there was Goody Good. Sarah Good. So that's the first name previously brought up by Putnam. And the second name brought up by Putnam, Goody Osborne. I knew it. She was the midwife. My baby's always shriveled in her hands. You must tell more names. Look at her, Tituba. God will bless you for your help. And that's when Abigail starts her award-winning performance, realizing she can get on the bandwagon here. I want to open myself. I want the light of God. I want the sweet love of Jesus. I danced for the devil. I saw him. I wrote in his book. I go back to Jesus. I kiss his hand. And now she starts naming more names. And this is going to get picked up by the other children. And this is going to lead up to this wonderful climax to Act 1. I saw Sarah Good with the devil. I saw Goody Osborne with the devil. I saw Bridget Bishop with the devil. Betty gets up. I saw George Jacobs with the devil. I saw Goody Howe with the devil. I saw Martha Bellows with the devil. Abigail. I saw Goody Sibber with the devil. Betty. I saw Alice Murray with the devil. Uh, the the marshal. I'll call the marshal. In other words, they need someone now to go and arrest these people who've been mentioned. Let the marshal bring irons, something to not tie them up, to keep them, something made of iron, shackles, handcuffs. Abigail, I saw Goody Hawkins with the devil. I saw Goody Bibber with the devil. I saw Goody Booth with the devil. On their ecstatic cries, the curtain falls. So that's the Act 1 curtain. This is where you get to go outside and have a whiskey. And I think you'll agree this is a pretty compelling ending to Act 1, and one that would encourage you, hopefully, to come back in after that whiskey to see Act 2. So this is really built up so cleverly from that quiet moment at the beginning, Parris praying at Betty's bedside, to this crazy ending with all these children screaming out who they saw with the devil. And we as the audience have a pretty good clue they're making this up. They're getting on the bandwagon, on Abigail's bandwagon. Looks like Abigail's in charge of this town now. So a lot's happened in Act 1. We found out about the affair with John Proctor and Abigail. We've met the Putnams. We've met Rebecca Nurse, the old lady. And she's going to be an important character to the end. We haven't met Giles Corey's wife, but we've heard of her. Him with his, I wanted to say innocent question, but it was an unfortunate question, this thing about the books. Later on, they're going to turn that against poor Martha Corey. We've met Mary Warren, who looked like the weak link. Only for a few seconds we met her. And we've discovered the truth of what those children did in the woods, and how terrifying Abigail's motives were. Abigail wanted to kill John's wife. So a whole lot of drama, and I think you'd better go out and have that whiskey now so you can process all this. And we look forward to seeing you in the theatre again for Act 2. Thank you.